Hi, this is Kiki. Right before upload, we found that Jonathan Söderström followed me on Twitter. So basically this means one of the developers of Hotline Miami probably watches this video right now, and I'm fucking terrified. So no offense intended, we still love Hotline Miami. Please love us back. Oh no. Also, spoiler warning for both Hotline Miami games and Katana Zero. Bye!
Out of all the games released in 2019, our favorite would either have to be the brilliantly mind-bending Baba Is You or the provocative action romp of Katana Zero. This is a game which has garnered lots of well-deserved praise for its simple yet addictive design, versatile level layouts, and clever use of time-bending mechanics. It has in many cases been compared to the 2012 modern classic Hotline Miami, a game equally centered around quick spurts of gruesome violence in an obsessive strive for flawless execution of level goals. However, what struck out to us more in the comparison of the two games was the subtle but effective presentation of themes within the respective narratives, and how this similarity worries us. Now, don't get this the wrong way, we love both of these games equally and would struggle to find any glaring flaws in them by themselves. The problem arises with the added context that inevitable sequels may bring to our work that already brought its message across clearly, and how this runs a high risk of devaluing the reading of its predecessor. But let's go back and take a look at this from the start. In 2012, the breakout indie success Hotline Miami is released to high critical acclaim. It's a game praised mainly for its core mechanics, with secondary interest put on its narrative and thematic execution. Now, this is fairly understandable, as the surface level story in the original Hotline Miami is pretty bare bones, save for a few key sequences. It mostly serves its purpose in getting you from level to level, filled with enemies to kill. In essence, you're just some guy working as a hitman, eventually toppling a crime boss in revenge. Interspersed with this are seemingly cryptic scenes of reality-bending nonsense that will appear completely unrelated to the main story beats. Scenes that stirred a lot of debate and excessive theorizing of how the internal lore of Hotline Miami functioned and how all the puzzle pieces fit together.
But Biker came directly here after a drug-fueled party at his apartment, which could have skewed his perception of the events, thus making him an unreliable narrator as well. Ultimately, the truth of what really happened in this room is left a mystery, and we're left wondering what actually happened.
Now, not to be rude, but we are gonna be completely blunt and to the point here. This kind of reaction to media is pretty shallow and a bit naive even. It's taking a story and reading it at face value without any added thought to what it actually has to say. An all-encompassing perspective that the diegetic world is all there is to our work. It is what we would call the Doug Walker school of analysis. Of course, the strictly literal is the only aspect we can all agree on with facts and logic, which is likely why these naked components are what's mostly focused on in internet discourse. If we can all agree, we're all happy. Or, perhaps, we have all been slowly conditioned by mainstream media to fully embrace the figurative over the abstract. It should be clarified though that we are not putting blame on any one individual here. The people who are, for example, making lore videos on the internet are probably pretty neat guys. We wish them the best and hope that they are having a good time doing what they do. We're just proposing the radical idea that perhaps what we learned in high school literature analysis classes can be equally applied to any other media, not just books, like video games. By analyzing the prevalent themes and subjects of Hotline Miami, it's pretty easy to draw conclusions to what it's about on a deeper level. This is always subjective, of course, but usually the point of importance will have fairly clear inclinations. We just have to draw our own conclusions from them. And this is the beauty of a complete and self-contained work. We, as the audience, are given all the important aspects in one package, and are therefore able to read the entire thing through whatever lens is handed to us by the thematic inclinations presented within said work. For example, to us, Hotline Miami was a clear critique on violence in video games by juxtaposing addictive fun with shockingly gruesome violence, placing the player in an uncomfortable, hypocritical dilemma where they are unknowingly fooled into enjoying what they would otherwise find despicable. There is also a fascinating character portrait in the silent protagonist, where action speaks louder than words. Haunted by his own demons, the player character, commonly referred to as Jacket, performs heinous crimes, tiptoeing around the truth of his actions by secretive code word formulations on his voicemail. Like different personas, Jacket disguises himself in masks with their own names and distinctive traits, always putting the blame on someone else, always denying his own guilt, until of course consequences catch up with him and robs him of what he holds most dear. The idea that we play this game through the perspective of a highly unreliable narrator goes full circle when the game gives us a key turning point where Jacket and another character, referred to by the community as Biker, face off in a life or death duel. What is so interesting about this is that both of them will die at the hand of the other at some point in the story. We are paradoxically allowed to follow both characters from this binary outcome, placing high doubt on whatever story Jacket is telling us, as the one Biker presents is equally plausible. The strength of an interactive medium like video games is that within a narrative context, two radically different outcomes of one situation can be equally true and meaningful. It doesn't matter what is canon within the internal universe of Hotline Miami. What really matters is that we are able to explore the different outcomes of any one situation. In fact, the highly unlinear nature of how we consume video games allows both scenarios to be so-called canon. As such, Hotline Miami leaves you with a good feeling that both of your protagonists live on to see another day, independent of whatever outcome the other faced. From your perspective as a player, everything happened the way you saw it. The game seemingly even mocks the shallow perspective of straight answers by naming the Biker Act, well, answers, only for the player to be faced with caricatures of the actual developers explaining that it's all just a game. Simply put, to have a fulfilling experience, we don't need to know every last intrinsic detail of how the world functions. We don't need to know what in-universe history led to the events of the game to take place, or what the societal outcome of the presented events would be. And then the developers made Hotline Miami 2 and went out of their way and explained every last intrinsic detail of how the world functions. They explained what in-universe history led to the events of the first game to take place and what the societal outcome of the presented events would be. When we talk about the shortcomings of Hotline Miami 2, what usually crops up is the expanded level design. Having enemies see further than the player with loads of long corridors and annoying windows vastly increases the risk of being spotted and killed practically anywhere. For such a tight-knit experience as the first game was, this completely kills the joy of the game and slows the pace down to a crawl where any failure can undo several minutes of work. Where the first game is well structured and comprised of purposely short sections to remain approachable to the player, the sequel is an unfocused nightmare of never-ending sheep shots. Case in point, see this level in the original Hotline Miami, where you walk down a corridor toward unseen enemies only to immediately be shot to death. It's a reckless approach to danger, and as such, the game guides you towards climbing out a window and taking the back door from the balcony. The game basically teaches you how to approach danger through clever design. The creator's self-insert is even there to smugly smile at you from the sidelines. They knew what they were doing. Meanwhile, in Hotline Miami 2, you're basically required to walk towards unknown danger at every turn. Every single turn. It is not even a joke, it's like the developers suddenly forgot about the level design philosophy of the first game. While the sequel in many ways is a much more frustrating and annoying game, the aspect that really bothered us way more was the narrative presentation. If you were playing and enjoying the original Hotline Miami as a deeply individualistic character study where the simple structure allowed for thematic clarity, it's pretty jarring to go from this core anchor point into suddenly exploring, literally, everything else. Like seriously, did we really need to know that this random dead guy and the store clerk were Jacket's friends from fake Vietnam? Yes, this happens! There is a fake Vietnam War on Hawaii, and apparently this is the place where this guy got a psychotic breakdown and started the furry murder community. What does this even add? I mean, why does it take until halfway through the second game in the series for most people to connect the dots that this is meant to be set in an alternative past with vastly different outcomes than in reality? Also, nuking San Francisco. Thanks. I hate it. Hotline Miami 2 outright says fuck subtext and confirms everything in the first game was for real and that this is just a really messed up world where everyone massacres whole buildings of people on the daily. Sure, the reading may be that violence is not just a personal shortcoming, but that it spreads through society like a disease. However, the contrast in clarity gives a general impression that Hotline Miami 2 is mostly concerned about world building and lore. The player constantly switches perspective from character to character with no real consistency other than the two existing in the same universe at some point in time. You are playing as this guy for one level only to kill him in the very next one, or switch over to a completely new setting seemingly at random. It's narrative whiplash, like 3 games worth of storytelling mixed into a blender. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work. It seems the developers went into this game with the noble goal of bigger and better, but it backfired horribly. It is a bit like if everyone playing the first game only asked menial diegetic questions, so the developers felt that this was what they had to cater to, completely ruining the point of the predecessor in the process.
Phone told me to kill people. But who was Phone?
In short, the highly pessimistic reading would be that the first game is a dangerously intimate criticism of violence in media, where the second game reveals that all along, it was just a glorification of said violence. Like a teenager's perspective of cool, we go from destroying edginess into embracing it. This is the dangers of critique being misread as praise, where your audience becomes what you tried to subvert in the first place. That is to say, if you're not careful, you will fall right into the trap of catering to the one demographic you wanted to alienate in the first place. Which then leads us back to Katana Zero, a game that presents its world through the messed up perspective of its troubled protagonist, constantly questioning what's real or not, never knowing for sure if anything is. Katana Zero is set in a world where super soldiers in drug withdrawal are used by opposing factions to fight over the last scraps of precious resources that make them go on from day to day. However, the story of Katana Zero is about a mentally ill protagonist struggling with drugs and medication as they twist his perception of reality, all the while trying to keep his morality in check from heavy guilt of past deeds. Say it with me now, setting and narrative are not the same thing. If you want to understand whatever a storyteller really wants to tell you, you need to find the one relatable human element at the core of the story. No one, and I mean no one watching this, will know what it's like to be a time-manipulating samurai serial killer. However, surely some of you will know the feeling of visiting a psychologist, the side effects of medication, drinking your troubles away, drug problems, sleep paralysis, brain saps, freaky nightmares, zoning out during conversations, blackouts, memory loss, and hallucinations. You might recognize that while these may be hard things to live with, you can still find some light in the darkness through everyday things like friendship and simple amusement, like renting a movie, or playing a video game. Oh my god, that's what I'm doing now! Katana Zero is a fairly self-contained story that neatly wraps up its thematic message. It's perfectly fine the way it is. Which is why the to be continued in the end is so bothersome. Vague storytelling being expanded for a sequel? It's like we've seen this before. And yeah, we've already seen you guys. Saying you don't get anything about the game, finding the ending disappointing, trying to figure out what's canon or not realizing that the time manipulation is just a neat way of contextualizing player agency within the confines of the game world. That this sort of time traveling is how you can see every outcome of every situation, of how choosing either life or death is equally valid for the full picture. We personally don't want this shallow perspective on narrative to dictate how Katana Zero 2, or would that be Katana 1, whatever, how the sequel is gonna be told. We don't want answers to redundant questions, like what is diegetically real, and we don't think that we should ask for more lore. We should ask for thematic expansion. We shouldn't simply ask how this world is structured and functions. We should ask how this world furthers the message and values at the core of the story. However botched Hotline Miami 2 was in practice, it still serves as a good example of how not to treat a sequel. We can learn from it both when writing our own stories and in reading the works of others. For better or worse, it set a standard. And following a breakout success is always hard. Suddenly, the pressure is astronomical. The price you pay may be dear. You may have to bear the consequences. So perhaps it's best to embrace the golden mask and choose not to continue. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it and want to see more content from us, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/transparens. Like these lovely people did. Yes, apparently we have patrons now, which is exciting. Woo! Kiki is excited too. So a very special thanks to our patrons, Sweet Pink and Nocturno, for believing in us, even though we just had one video out when they started to support us. That is very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kisses all over the place. Delicious.